It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on your path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Revenue North Star, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenues, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales customized to your company environment. Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of The Revenue Maze. I have a wonderful guest, and his sense of humor is very fun. A little bit dry, but very fun. He has 4 kids. Now, that's interesting enough, but they're all under the age of 6. He is a guitar-playing Kansas Jayhawks fan. His hobby is golf, but his wife whoops his butt, as that's what he says. So obviously 4 kids under 6, and his wife kicks his butt. So she must be an amazing woman. We'll talk about that a little bit. He loves to give back to the community. He's an innovative industry leader and a VP of sales at WarehouseQuote. Welcome, Mike Adkins.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm super excited about this dialogue. We've had a really great chat before, and I think people want to hear a lot about you. But first of all, we always ask the same silly question. What is one thing that you can tell the listeners and the viewers that will help them get out of the revenue maze?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this a little bit before. There's so much in starting a business and getting the revenue wheel really turning. And for us, I think what was really important, and me personally, was just the clarity around what we were doing. So, I think we had stop gaps in each phase of our growth and development, and maturizing the sales process that, I think there are points where you just have to step back and say, what are we doing very simply today, and what's really important this month, this quarter, this year, if you're looking out that far. And I think really just focusing on that clarity in all that you do, whether it's messaging, reporting, in terms of success, discussing what you do with customers. If you can't be clear around where you're going, it's really hard to get there, and it's really easy to deviate off the path. So we almost, is beating a drum in many cases, especially early, as we were really trying to find our niche and our message.
Yeah. So you hear a lot about that. You hear a lot about, okay, be clear, but it's very difficult. Sometimes you think you are being clear, first of all, and I always kind of use the term, I'm a hero in my own mind, as a joke, right? Because a lot of times I think I'm being very clear, and then you find out later, no, it wasn't very clear. So give us a couple of pointers of how you've kind of sort of done that throughout your career.
Right. I think just specifically with WarehouseQuote. So, I left the big safe consulting world about 2.5 years ago. Had a pretty position where I was just had to keep marching and waiting, and looking at potential partnership at a pretty large firm. And, I was sitting around when I got introduced to Ben Hagedorn and Jordan Brunk, my CMO, and CEO. Ben's our CEO. Apologize for that. I was really taken off guard by their vision and clarity and what they wanted to do, I think, very early. And it was incredibly important, I think, in recruiting me to come over and help build the sales team here. At that point in my life, I wasn't, my vision and clarity on just my personal goals wasn't incredibly clear. And I wasn't, I think, 100% bought in that the big firm consulting partnership, the golden handcuffs that come along with that was really what I wanted at this point. in my life. And I really had to sit down and look at, personally, what did I want to do over the next 3 to 5 years? And I've always enjoyed being around growth. I love building something. Previously, built several practices and handed them off, and the opportunity to come in, build, and potentially, change lives of the folks we're working around, right? Build something of value, was incredibly intriguing to me. So, that's really in terms of Warehouse Quote and where we're at today. Like that moment of clarity when I wrote down really what I wanted to do. I distilled that into kind of the top three, 3 to 5 things I wanted to achieve over the course of the kind of the near and intermediate future. And, that really helped me make, I think, one of the better decisions I've ever made in coming over to Warehouse Quote.
So it's interesting because you kind of brought up a couple of things. First of all, it started with yourself on the clarity and defining your personal vision and
Mhm.
mission statements and things like that. And, there's a lot of self-help out there that all say that that's what you need to know. You need to know where you want to be. What do you want to do?
Yep.
And you end up, it's kind of back in the college days where you're kind of like trying to decide your major or where you kind of go. And it can be kind of gut wrenching a little bit,
Mhm.
but it's just kind of what I call 101, right? You've got to know what it is you want and go after it, because then you're going to have all these other things that get in the way, but you kind of can pivot around those. Why don't more businesses understand that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of noise out there. You mentioned, I don't know how many thousands of self-help books, and between the both of us, I'm sure we have a bookshelf full of books around sales and revenue management and RevOps, and
Yes.
all these different schools of thought that are the way to do it, right? The you know the ticket punching, process, or add to your team, or how to hire. There's all these noises, all these, I think, different directions you can be pulled if you really dive in. And to step back and simplify, and I'm a big on lists. If it's not on the list, it's probably not happening. I carry a little tiny notebook around with me to track all the things I got to do. But when I get a little bit overwhelmed with, gosh, this approach versus this approach, or we want to have this particular sales process opposed to this, or we want to track it this way or that way. I think stepping back and saying, okay, what's my objective here? What do we want to be able to do, right? And get that into max 2 to 3 bullet points. Options start falling off very quickly. And I think simplicity is one of the keys to clarity, at least in my experience. And if you don't spend time to simplify your decision making process, you just have a lot of input in which you're trying to get an output of, right? So
Yeah.
I think that really distilling what's important, ranking, prioritizing, getting to that top 2 to 3 is one of the most important things you can do in achieving some clarity around whatever's on your plate at the time.
Yeah, I love that. There is a lot of noise. And, there's different groups that are even talking about indecision being a decision
Mhm.
these days because of the noise, right? I mean, I struggle with that as well. We all sort of do, I have kind of an eclectic personality, so my home is a bit eclectic, and my daughters are like, well, maybe if we just kind of got rid of this. And I'm not a hoarder. So if anybody's
Yeah.
asking, I'm not a hoarder, but they're like all my little treasures. And so I am a little bit curious of how you've been able to kind of simplify it down to the top three, for instance. And I'm
Mhm.
sure others welcome that advice, because that is hard, right? You're going, well, that's a shiny object. This is a shiny object. This is my treasure. This is
Mhm.
my whatever.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you mentioned, uh, just that indecision is a decision, right? And I think, back to sales, right? Yeah, I think, gosh, if you're not clear about why you're the right decision for a customer, I mean, that's exactly where I think leads to the indecision decision, right?
Sure.
We all say that time kills all deals, and in my experience, especially, I think in the industry we're in, it certainly is true. So if you can't clarify why it is that you're the best option for the moment, and ideally long term with customers, it becomes a tough thing to do. I think the concept of the needs, wants, and wish list, right? And again, I just need to simplify things in my head, so I can get my head around them. But when you really take a look at the list of things, right, that are really important, and trying to distill that, depending on where you're at in like, you might not have time for the wants, or the wishes, right? Everybody wants to be, in high growth mode and have automation all over the place. But sometimes what you really need is a customer story, and to go get that one deal, and identify that one customer to bring in, and start building, a process, works. So I think just classifying it again in simple ways, like, what do I really need right now? What does my team really need? What does my lieutenant, from a sales perspective, really need? And I think if you really focus on what the necessity is, you get to point of clarity pretty quickly, and saying all this stuff is fluff, right? But we can't do without X, Y, and Z. And the list becomes pretty short, I think, pretty fast.
Mm. That's sage advice, because in my own practice, that has been a challenge with all the competing priorities, right? And just taking that step back to say, okay, for the moment, what is needed? Because I tend to, especially in a chief revenue officer standpoint, I'm always looking 5 years out at what the plan could be, testing it,
Mhm.
and then standing that up, right? And as I stand that up, then I have to go year by year, what is needed by then. So my mind is constantly churning at what's next. And you're completely right. When I think about some of them, I was talking to a client this morning. He's like, right now, this is what we need. We'll worry about the year out,
Mhm.
this kind of thing. And it's a great reminder, because I think we kind of all get in that mode. I mean, people are talking about recession right now, and they're like, what do I do? And that almost is counter to what they should be doing, right? So that's
Yeah, and
awesome.
I think, especially, in early stages, um, it's very hard, I think, to predict where exactly you're going to be in 18 months, right? When you're opening the doors to a new, kind of a new venture, right? And um, y- you can make so many assumptions, and I think you can get very easily into a rut of kind of almost pre-playing the tape, right? Like, this is how it's all going to go, right?
Yeah.
But it's all based upon assumptions, and what I fabricated in my mind is, what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Where I think, for us, it was, all right. The next 30 days, we're really going to refine message. We're going to get it out in the field. We're going to get feedback. Like, we're going to take this down, and distill it down to the simplest points we can, and communicating what we need to customers. Okay, well, now we got our message. Now it becomes, how do we um, measure progression of the customer journey through a pursuit, and how do we keep them moving along the lines to eventually a deal? And what's important, where are we falling short, from a progression perspective, and how do we just narrow in on that one piece of the puzzle? And I think, I had a mentor once said, Mike, don't boil the ocean, right? Which I always, she was from Iowa, and that's a pretty common saying in those parts, which is funny because it's there's no oceans around, but everybody says it for some reason. And in a lot of things, when things get complicated, I think we have a tendency of trying to fix it all,
Yeah.
or a shotgun approach to saying, well, we'll see what gets fixed first. And again, stepping back and say, okay, what's really broken here? What if we improve it is going to impact us the most in the next 2 weeks, 30 days, et cetera, and really just hyper focusing on some of those things. And I think if you break it out, you can feel momentum, which is important to me. Like progress is important. Like I can't the status quo. I'll get bored, frustrated with. Right, I'm a results person, as many sales folks are, many leaders of companies as well. Right, it's all about getting to the next objective. But if the objectives are a little smaller, and a little bit easier to attain, and you're celebrating the small wins, I think it's a lot easier to make progress pretty quickly.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me a little bit back to uh, you kind of started in this new venture with Warehouse Quote. And how did that come about? What were you kind of alluded to that a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. No, it was an interesting progression because I took a left turn, compared to most of my colleagues, and it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So April 2020. Previously I was working at RSM. It was a large consultancy. I led a technology service line and Microsoft practice there. So I was in the tech space and professional services. And I got to a point where I just wasn't sure if um, the road I had been traveling for 8 years, which was a very strange realization, right? So in a partner model, right? The goal every day, for somebody, at least from my perspective, was get a little bit closer, right? Get a little bit closer to be invited into the circle, right? And then one day I kind of had this, again, a moment of I, it eventually became clarity, right? Where it's just like, this isn't maybe what I want to do for the next, however many years. It's a long-term commitment, and I wasn't sure that I was, quite had found my calling. You know, Additionally, we benefited from a lot of growth, and the company got really big. And I'm just, you probably know this from the few conversations we've had, is I'm just not a red tape guy. I just, I need to run a little bit. And in talking to Ben and Jordan, that opportunity presented itself. I felt like they were bringing a unique solution, specific to industry. It was very similar to the managed IT offering that many companies out there provide, but it was applied to warehousing and distribution, which, in and of itself, kind of that model in that space was pretty unique.
Hmm.
And then just the unit economics of recurring revenue and fairly sticky business, et cetera. Like all those things were exciting, and so was the prospect of growing it. And my moment of clarity in deciding to move forward, after I'd gone through all the list and distilling it down, trying to be somewhat process oriented around it, was, um, you know, holy cow, the world is ending. Still considering this move. Like in normal circumstances, I would have done it immediately, right?
Yeah.
In kind of that moment, I said, "Look, this has got to be the right thing for me to follow right now," and made the jump. And I think the day I said yes, I was on a plane for the current employer. I was in Detroit Airport. It was shut down. There was nothing in there. I was supposed to go to a Sixers game in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
Was told to turn around, and that day the NBA shut down, right? So like the world was literally coming to a
Yep.
standstill. And I called Ben when I got home. I said, I'm in, you know, and and the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did Warehouse Quote work through your clarity model for revenue? I'm
Well,
just
yeah, I
curious.
mean, well, you know, I'm not saying I was oversold with kind of the progressions that have been made, but it was definitely blank sheet of paper when I came in. So, just everything needed to be uh, uh, stood up. From the what is our standard, what are the stage gates in our sales process, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't have a deck to even pull up, right? So we, had to work through some of that. And, I think for me, coming from out of industry, it was very important for me to get my brain around simplicity, right? What are we doing? And, you know, the leadership here, Ben and Jordan, I've always been big on clarity. And really, we had three components we were bringing to the market, and that was a network of warehouses. So you provide scalable and flexible solutions for distribution,
Uh-huh.
technology that brings all of that stuff together and gives you insights to run your business, and support, because supply chain is hard and things happen, and very few folks out there, I realized, really truly want to be accountable in handling handling the issues. And those were our three things, and those became, for a period of time, like our three uniques is what we call them, right? And
Mhm.
we just, almost every meeting, every all hands, we were really just hammering this home. So it was just the corporate vernacular, right, of what we did, and was natural for us to talk about. And I think customers and prospects are very keen on sniffing out when you're not on board with something, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to sell something you're not sold on.
Yeah.
And for us, it was getting really comfortable around that. And what do we do every day for our customers, and what value are we bringing them? And we marched with those kind of the discussion points around those three uniques for months. I mean, just every day. And today, I think we could still ask anybody in the company what our three uniques are, and they'd be able to rattle them off pretty quickly. So again, just what do we do? Very basically, what are the three things we bring to the table? And that was really effective in getting our messaging put together.
You know, so I had Catherine Brown on recently and we were talking. I don't know if you've read her book, but it's How Good Humans Sell. And one of the key points that we were talking about was making it easy on customers to buy. And one of the challenges that quite often you run into is a founder or owner really is passionate about what they're doing. They believe in it. They believe in it, right? And then you have to scale. You have to be able to get others in your company to have that same passion, because you're right. The customer sniffs if something isn't quite there. That person doesn't believe in it. And actually I was talking to Mel over at Omicol, the same thing. She had said quite emphatically, make it easy. Yet we all as humans seem to want to overcomplicate that,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's like, so you have these two founders that you align with completely. Now you're building this team and they now know there's three differentiators. You call them three uniques, right? Or whatever you
Right, right.
actually just
Yeah,
said. And that's huge.
yeah.
That's very important because then people can get behind it, right? They can really understand it. So how have you guys kind of, you said at all hands, all of these things. How are you going to work those three through your scaling? Because you
Yeah.
guys are at a fast growth mode, correct?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So, one, it was reiteration. So, Ben, our CEO, we kind of lead the all hands, and he has this thing where he does some questions up front, just kind of facts about the company or some of the individuals, hidden talents, those types of things. And, has a, bag of kind of candy, and I'll throw it out when somebody gets it right. And every single one, he asked what our three uniques are, right? So it's coming from the top from Ben. So he was really big on clarity within our sales process. Okay, we have a particular opportunity. Rank our three uniques against what the customer really needs at that point, right? And so in every sales cycle, right, we're in order for things to move forward, we're requiring our sales personnel to understand where exactly we align with the customer at a very simple level, right? For all the major scoping and technology, like how are we aligning with what they need with what we can provide, right? And the strength of that alignment obviously leads to higher that alignment, the higher propensity to close a deal, right? And it was just really kind of in everything that we were doing. I created laminated cards, 8x11 that had triggers, and but they were all aligned to our three unique. So everything that I think our folks were seeing and the processes that they were continuing to develop somehow hinged off of what those three uniques were. It was kind of embedded in everything. And when you find something real, I think you feel is really important, to have a little bit of that in everything you're doing, some way or another, just to be a tether back to why are we here, right? Is I think incredibly effective, and it just is pervasive, right? It gets into everything. So there's no escaping it. And if we wanted to change it to the 4 pillars, like we would have trouble probably doing it, right? Because it's so in everything that we do, that it's just everywhere. So I think really showing commitment, that is commitment, right? It's not throwing it up on a wall, and letting it sit there, right? Like you got to really challenge, I think, as your people are coming up with new processes and ways to work and interactions with customers or each other, like what, it's really important. It just needs to be, how does it relate to X, Y, and Z, right? And those were often the questions and, critical challenges, right? As we were having strategy meetings, like how does this align to our three uniques, right? And being able to tie it off and being very intentional about, again, just tying something to something simple, right? And something we felt we have put together a really clear understanding internally around.
Well, that is really cool listening to that story. And yes, being very intentional, because we can end up very much, I think at the beginning of this conversation, you kind of mentioned something that gets us off true north if we don't, right? I mean, we have our guiding star, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in the wrong country because we went off that guiding star. So I think that's very compelling. So Mike, let's hear, like, if you had the ability, now you talked about 4 kids, so I'll kind of change this up. You've got 4 kids under the age of 6. If you could go back to kind of your younger, wiser self, and so maybe picture one of your kids, what advice would you give them? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think beware the noise is probably one of the biggest ones, right? And I've kind of weaned myself off of, for the most part, the social media, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but I know I'm the type of guy that like I'll dive in and I'll go down the rabbit hole. Right?
I do too. I do too.
The hour I just spent going through Instagram pages or whatever, like, gosh, maybe if my goal is really to become a better sales leader or pitch man or inside sales rep, and prospecting, right? Like to me, like replacing that time, the noise, with productive things around, improving your skill set, knowledge, becoming just a better professional, is much better use of the time, right? And pays out far more than the immediate gratification I get on jumping down, the social media pages. So, this is one example of the noise, right? I think when we have goals and setting, things that again aren't that important aside, maybe, financially you're trying to get somewhere and saying, look, the vacation just, that's a want or a wish this year, right? And I'm, this is my goal and clear is to, pay off my car in the next 12 months, right? Is
Yeah.
like, well, if the world doesn't work and being able to do everything at once, right? And so separating out some of the noise because my buddy wants to go on a golf trip or whatever, and say no, like maybe I should probably stick to my goals. I think just understanding and kind of tuning your ears to what the noise really is, and being conscious that it's always out there. I think when I remove it, things just become easier, for me personally. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Distraction is very much out there, and time is our only thing that we own, right? And what we do
100%.
with our time.
Yeah. Yeah. And what goes along with that is, do what you want, right? And what drives you. And, I realized that the title of partner at previous firm wasn't the thing that really drove me. I like being around the growth and the opportunity to start a company at X, end up in Y, and have so many lives, and we got some big goals, right? Like some life changing stuff, and the the potential to impact, the people we're working with every day, and really provide a completely new path for them. Like that to me is incredibly exciting. To be able to impact in a positive way the people we're working with every day. So that I found out, that's what really motivated me. And like, don't be afraid to run after it.
Yeah.
Show no fear. So it'll it'll happen. I wish I would have taken, to advice. I wish I would have taken a few more risks probably earlier on, where it was, you know, my 22-year-old brain did not comprehend that when I was, 33 with, three and a half kids, right? That like I had a lot more to worry about from a risk perspective. That like that's the time to go after it. And retrospectively, probably wish I would have done a little bit more of that, and just stuck my neck out there a little bit further early on.
No regrets, no regrets, because
No
that's what
regrets.
you
Yeah,
that's as
we're
you
here.
came, that's
Yeah.
where you've come to, right? That's our learning and growth in life. And it'll probably change. I hate to tell you this because I'm a little bit older than you. It'll probably change again once in a while.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, and then, yeah, at some point, you need a new moment of clarity, right? So what are we going
Exactly.
after?
It keeps life super exciting.
Yeah, I
So,
can I can tell you mine's never dull, with
not
everything
with
going on,
not
so,
with 4 kids under the age of 6. Do you
there's
ever even
always
get to
something.
sleep?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were joking a little bit earlier. I mean, my clarity for me every day is starting with 4 kids and ending with 4 kids, right? So that's the goal, and, everything else is, icing on the cake.
Yeah, that would be in that mode. So,
Keeping it
Mike,
simple.
they love to, the audience also likes to hear more about you. Like we talked about golf. Obviously, your wife kicks your butt in golf. You
Mhm.
already said
Yep,
that. What are
yep.
some of the fun things that you do with these 4 kids under 6 and your me time and
Oh yeah, I think one of the favorite things I like to do is I kind of rotate them out on taking them out one at a time. It's funny how different they are, even when you separate them together. So spending a little time with them, just run into maybe a local event in town that, one, I went to a monster truck rally like last year, which
Uh-huh.
I had never been to one. And so it was a new experience for me, but something I probably would have never done on my own. But you know, I have a 3 and 5 year old boys, so you couldn't get more cool than than monster trucks flying through the air. So uh, you know, uh, those types of things I think are a lot of fun. And you mentioned time as being the kind of the one thing we don't have a whole lot of, or at least it's the most limited resource we have, right? So I think I do take a little bit more time than I used to, just slowing down a little bit,
Hmm.
and taking the weekend and really, heading out for a weekend trip, or jumping right into an event that my kids want to go to, or again, just not having everything so planned out, and really kind of just living in the moment a little bit. That's where I probably get the most fun, and I think the most fun things happen. That's when it's shaken up. But yeah, like you mentioned, I you know for for fun, I'm just trying to catch my wife on the golf course. So it's been a humbling existence. We've been married for 10 years, and kind of together for 15. So since I met her, she was first time I saw her swing a golf club, I said, oh man, I'm in for a long haul here. So but we do that together. That's kind of our time out alone, and when we can, spend a couple hours away from the kids and get into the quiet. We might not say anything for 4 hours, and that might just be fine, depending on what's going on that day. So, but just really taking the time. I think it's easy to work. For me, you could classify me probably as a workaholic, like probably a lot of your listeners and
Yeah.
yourself. Always got to be doing something. And really have enjoyed the last couple of years, just taking a little time out and saying, look, the time spent over here is just as important. In as the 80-hour week or whatever might be on the table.
Yeah. So, do I have this right? You married your wife for her golf swing, or is that
Yeah,
she
I
won your
did.
heart?
Yeah, we were dating, and yeah, she's a great scramble partner. So uh, we after that, it was history was already written. But no,
I
she's a fabulous golfer, and probably a better human than me. So it's been good for me to have her around.
that's so funny. My husband says that he married me because I ate a pint of ice cream in about 10 minutes and put him under the table when we first met each other. I don't have the claim to the golf swing, but that was
Yeah, my wife has shown some pretty good dance moves, and especially back in our college days. So that's probably when I whether I knew it or not, I decided. I said, look, I'll take the one dancing on the table. So
Well, she sounds like a blast. That's amazing.
yeah, she's a lot of fun.
Well, Mike, this has just been such a fun episode on clarity, on where you've come from, where you're going. The three uniques, I'm going to remember that left and right, three uniques. What's your three uniques? That's going to definitely help me for today. Where can the listeners get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the best way is LinkedIn. So of the social media still left in my on my phone, the app still left on my phone. That's probably the one I'm most active on.
If you're
Generally,
active on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm, open to connections there. So I'm always happy to connect and, whether it's, leveraging my network to help out or a quick conversation or a call. I always enjoy doing that. So, probably the quickest way. And if, any of those are rather do, email or something like that, Adkins, Madkins at WarehouseQuote.com.
Very cool. Well, there you all have it. It's another great episode on the Revenue Maze. I have had an amazing guest. I want to thank everybody for listening and viewing. And if you liked it, share it, love it, give Mike a shout out. We certainly appreciate his time today and for all the listeners. And again, thank you so much, Mike.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a blast and, great to get to know you a little bit more, during this conversation.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. For show notes, links, and resources, visit revenuemaze.com. And never forget, you are why.